I want to welcome you all to this Lunch and Learn session to learn more about what other groups and partners that we work with are doing to share the work of trying to build our democracy here. So we have two really great updates today. One on the ERA from Suzanne Wilhite, and then also Jean Massey is with us today to talk about where we're at with ranked choice voting. So very exciting to learn from both of them and to answer any questions you have. Throughout, if you want to put your questions in the chat, because we have a group bigger than my screen can see, I can't always see you raise hands as well. So if you want to put it in the chat, if you feel like I'm ignoring you, certainly try raising your hand too, and we'll get at it that way. So, and we'll keep to a solid hour, but we'll start today with Suzanne Wilhite from ERA Minnesota, and give you about 15 minutes to kind of give us an update and ask some questions on the ERA. Thanks for being with us today, Suzanne.
Okay, well, I have some updates on the Equal Rights Amendment, and I've got a short, maybe I'll do is a jump in on some key issues around the Equal Rights Amendment, where we are today, because as most people may know, we have met the requirements for our federal Equal Rights Amendment according to Article 5 of the Constitution. That says we need 3/4 of the states. That would be 38. 2 years ago, Virginia, state of Virginia, ratified the Equal Rights Amendment, and we assumed that would be published in the Constitution, but we had an administration that was blocking that, and Trump directed the Attorney General Barr to put a hold on the Equal Rights Amendment. So for 2 years, we've been waiting, and actually another year of the Biden administration, because we assumed Biden would support this, and we had a new AG come in, and so things would improve with the new administration. But they haven't, and it's a year later. So now we've had 2 years, and the Equal Rights Amendment had a 2-year implementation period at the federal level that said, all you states, you got to clean up your laws. We'll give you 2 years to be in compliance. And so that 2 years will be up January 27th. That will be this week. Today's the 25th, 2 days. 2 years are up, and the states should have been updating their laws to meet equality on the basis of sex. So we're delayed, but at the same time, so many women across this country, as you probably know, are very angry and upset and saying, why isn't this done and why isn't it published? And we're going to celebrate January 27th. We've got a press conference set up with Sandy Pappas and Senator Sandy Pappas and Representative Rena Moran. They are doing a press conference on January 27th to say, okay, Minnesota, we're putting a bill in for compliance with the Equal Rights Amendment, and we're going to update all our laws, and that takes a process. So that means introducing a bill to do that. And so that's going to happen on the 27th. That is also in line with other events we've got, because day one, we're going to be back at the legislature for the Minnesota legislature to give us an update on where we are with our state Equal Rights Amendment. And we're still pushing to get a state constitutional amendment. So we got 2 pieces. We want the federal Equal Rights Amendment certified, published, and actually enforceable. And then we also want the state of Minnesota to add the Equal Rights Amendment. And that just means, as any other amendment through our state, that the House and Senate must pass it, that it would go on the ballot to be voted on in the general election in November. So we come back every year and we ask, and we get it through the House. We haven't been able to get it through the Senate. So we are really going to be working hard to get the Senate to allow people to vote on it. I mean, this is the roadblock we often have, is usually one person on a committee In the past, that's been Senator Limmer with the Judiciary Committee, and he has blocked having a hearing, and then we get blocked from a vote on the floor. But we don't anticipate any problems in the House again this year. We're going to be getting introduced our bills. I think we have 11 bills because we have multiple approaches and authors in the House, and those will be heard in our Judiciary Committee in the House by Jamie Becker Finn on February 1st. So we've got a good timeline. We have January 27th, where we are going to be having a press announcement celebration that the federal ERA is in effect and we need to be in compliance as a state. We have a rally scheduled on January 31st, which is the first day of our Minnesota legislative session, where we are going to rally for the Equal Rights Amendment, have our authors and speak to the need for the Equal Rights Amendment, and have our supporters show up at the Capitol. We are hoping we will follow COVID protocols. Masks are required, but we want to get back in the legislature and push our legislators to support equality for all. And if people are familiar, the language for Minnesota simply says that equality of rights shall not be denied on the basis of sex or gender. We have two versions of that bill. Sex is what the federal amendment is, but gender is more inclusive at this time, from 1972 when it was proposed to now. So we have both bills, but legally, the legal language, sex and gender, are equal under legal terms. So either version would work for us, and we support either. So we have January 27th, we have January 31st, and we have February 1st that are all ERA events happening at the legislature to try to push the Equal Rights Amendment both federally and in the state. And we welcome support. League of Women Voters supports the Equal Rights Amendment and has for many years. So we have many co-sponsors who are going to are supportive of us, and we appreciate that support. And it's another thing, even with that level of support, to get it through the legislature. So we've done polls in the past, and over 90% of people think we already have it, and over 90% think we should have it. So we have kind of a education problem in that people think it already passed and that was done way back when, but the truth is it didn't. And we're trying to highlight with the impacts of COVID on women and minorities, essential workers, care workers, that they are majorly impacted. And we're hearing about this from all areas, and everyone's hearing it. And now it's something that we can do something about, especially in terms of pay equity. Currently, you know the numbers, white women earned 82 cents on the dollar, same job. And for Latina women, they were earned 54 cents on the dollar. And we haven't budged much in years. So the pay gap is the real issue, but we often get snagged into side issues of abortion, that somehow this is going to increase abortion access. It's not. Matter of fact, 26 other states already have a state constitutional equal rights amendment, and Texas is one of them. So the state with the most restrictive abortion law has an equal rights amendment that says it will not discriminate on the basis of sex, race, national origin. So the arguments are thin on the abortion side. That's another legal issue, right to privacy, that has been decided. But it's an easy way to shut down the Equal Rights Amendment when the real impact is much greater in terms of pay inequity, violence, no recourse. We don't have the Violence Against Women Act renewed, healthcare access. There are so many areas where it would make such an improvement, and not only for women, it's on the basis of sex or gender, that it would improve life for all people. And so the the arguments against are pretty thin right now. If people remember the arguments against Equal Rights Amendment in the 70s, it related to the family's going to fall apart. People aren't going to want to get married. Oh my God, we'll have same-sex marriage, which we do, and the world didn't end. Women would get drafted in the military. Well, now women are in the military, and they'd like opportunities to improve their careers, be able to go up the ladder, and they're being discriminated against, and they cannot be in combat positions, even though they're fully qualified. So now we see the repercussions of discrimination in the military where women want to be in there. The draft hasn't happened, and it's not likely to happen. And there are women who want to serve and do serve in increasing numbers. So there's a lot of old arguments against that have fallen away. There's still concern about bathrooms, but somehow we're all getting along, and restaurants are accommodating us more and more. And every day in our home, we share a bathroom. So somehow we've been able to manage that piece as well. So I think a lot of the arguments that people wanted to have from the 70s, they're still there, but we also have moved way beyond that. And the true issues are really, if you could pay half your population less money for the same work, that is a huge impact. And we are seeing that with older women in poverty, lower Social Security checks. And so that's a real issue. The other ones tend to be red herrings that sidetrack the issue and are unrelated, but they're very easy to keep holding up and saying that's why the Equal Rights Amendment shouldn't pass. But it's still needed. And women are not protected in our Constitution. There's no language around discrimination of sex. And when Scalia made a decision, he said that. If the Constitution prohibited it, no, it doesn't. And he said it was never meant that for that. I mean, women were left out of the Constitution. So we know that we're still not included, and we need to be. So that's where we're at with the Equal Rights Amendment. We do have the rally coming up, and I've got a quick graphic to show you our sponsors on this. We've got quite a few, and we are adding every day. The YWCA has taken a stand. So just in terms of who's involved and why this matters is key. So you can see my screen. We've got day one for ERA, January 31st. And we've got a lot of great sponsors. We've added a few more since this. And if you want to know more information, it's available on our website. You can get news from there. But basically, we need people to advocate because it's going to be a tough session. And we know we have that opposition in the Senate. So it's going to be something that will need a lot of support to get through this year again. But I'm an optimist. So I don't know if you have time for questions, but if people have questions about Equal Rights Amendment and what we can do, I'm totally open.
Thanks, Suzanne. We do have a few questions in the chat so far, and I think you answered the first one, which has it been adjusted to be more gender neutral and inclusive of all genders? So that sounds like you have considered that.
Yes, and that was our biggest opposition in the House from some of our, they went on and on about genders and how many genders there are. But the reality is we're talking about people. And the reality is all people deserve equal legal rights. And I think what the opposition tends to do is try to splinter off and separate. Mm-hmm. But we want to be, and the 19th Amendment, which gave women the right to vote, doesn't say women, it says sex. Mm-hmm. So this is the same thing. It's patterned after that same language, and it's for all people.
Great. The next question is, when did the time limit for reaching 38 states get modified?
Well, that's the dilemma with some of the legal questions about, oh, doesn't that timeline expire in 1982? Well, the House, US House, has changed and said, delete the timeline. And that doesn't get through the Senate. We have the same situation at the federal level as we do at the state, where the parties, it's become a party issue, and the Republicans are blocking it in our US Senate. So we have had bills in there to delete the timeline. It's not clear that that is actually a roadblock, because we've had amendments, the 27th Amendment, which is over 200 years old, introduced by Madison, that allowed Congress people to increase their own pay, that passed in 1992. It was 200 years after it was introduced. So the time limit was put in the preamble. The states voted on the actual language of the amendment that was proposed. And so there's a question of, can there even be a time limit? So these are some of the legal roadblocks that are working their way through the court system. But technically, the Constitution itself in Article 5 does not allow a time limit. It doesn't promote a time limit. It says nothing about time limits.
Interesting. Great. And who are the state authors of the ERA bills, of the House bills?
Boy, we have a lot of them. So we have authors in the House, and we have authors in the Senate. Senator Sandy Pappas has always been a champion. Scott Dibble. We have Frank Hornstein as a representative. And I don't know if you're in the House, you can have multiple authors on bills. Senates, they tend to duplicate bills so they can have more authors that have their own bills. So it's a little different in each legislative body. But Barry Knish, Jen McEwen from Duluth. We have a lot of co-authors too. So we have quite a few, and we list them on our website, and we are sharing that information at our rally event. We'll have our authors speak at the rally.
So Suzanne, the bill numbers too, are those on your website, or could you get us the bill numbers, or can we pull them from there?
Yes, they are on our website, and it gets confusing because there are so many duplicate bills. We've got some specifics. We've done little postcards where we focus in on some key bills. And so I've got our new graphic right here that is a postcard where so here's House File 406 and Senate File 323. Those are our main bills. We have duplicate bills. And so, not to confuse people because it gets confusing. We also, so those are our state ERA Constitution, House File 406, Senate File 323. We also have a resolution to Congress to delete the timeline. So that's our federal, and we asked our state legislature to send that forward, and we have done that. Actually, Republicans have signed on to that in the past. It's an interesting piece. They can vote yes on that. And we've got about 8 Republicans that have signed on the last session that supported the resolution to Congress to delete the timeline, but they haven't voted for our own state equal rights amendment. And so we have 2 levels where we do that each session.
Great. I will also add to those league members on this call, if any of you are interested in following these bills for League of Women Voters Minnesota and joining in on our Lobby and Observer Corps, please shoot me an email, because we've got over 30 lobbyists signed up to follow bills, and this is certainly one of our priorities. So So just a little shout out there. One more question, Suzanne, and then we'll talk to Jean for a while, and you can stick around and answer any remaining questions at the end. Won't many bills make it harder to get anything done? Is the next question.
Well, it's interesting. I'm not a professional lobbyist and I don't understand the whole system. I just remember my civics and Schoolhouse Rock of, how a bill becomes a law. But it is, oftentimes it's required to get the attention, and depending, like I said, which House or Senate it is, because in the Senate, they limit the number of authors who can be on a bill. So then they'll do a duplicate bill and add authors on that. They do need to go through the same process. So it's often confusing to have multiple, but it does show support. And you can then have multiple authors, multiple co-authors on bills, and the rules are slightly different in the House versus the Senate. So I think it's more about trying to just have attention for your issue and trying to say, well, we do have some different focuses. Like I mentioned, there's the state equal rights amendment, and then there's a resolution to Congress. So then that's a separate bill. What will happen on Thursday with Sandy Pappas and Rena Moran are that we're doing a new compliance bill. So that is a separate bill that has a different intent of cleaning up our laws so they're not discriminatory on the basis of sex. So I don't understand why there's so many, but I understand that it's the way that our system is set up, and it's slightly different in each House or Senate.
Great. Yes, and Kathy, Tom's reminding us bill numbers this session will not be the same as last session. So they're numbered according to the order of introduction each session. So we will be looking forward to watching all of these great amendments and advocating as we can. So thanks, Suzanne, for that fabulous update. I learned a lot. And so now I would like to introduce Jean Massey from FairVote, Minnesota, to give us an update on ranked choice voting.
Well, thank you, Michelle and Suzanne. Thanks for that great update on the ERA. We'll have people at the rally and make sure people know about it as well. And Suzanne, you've been a great proponent of bringing ranked choice voting to your community in St. Louis Park. So thanks for that too. We also have Marcia with us today who can help provide some perspective on Bloomington, which just used ranked choice voting in the last election cycle in 2021. So lots of people who are familiar with ranked choice voting here. Could I have a show of hands of people in any of the 5 now cities using ranked choice voting if you lived and used ranked choice voting last year? Just raise your hand with the reaction button. Okay, so not that many of you. Okay, that's good. So it gives me a sense of kind of where to start. You probably know that the cities using ranked choice voting now in Minnesota include not just Minneapolis and St. Paul, but now Bloomington, Minnetonka, and St. Louis Park. So lots of experience that I'm happy to share today. But before I do that, I don't like to make too many assumptions about people's knowledge of what exactly ranked choice voting is, because while it's growing rapidly in popularity and use, it still is not the main way we do elections, and not everyone has that familiarity. So I'm just going to walk us through a few slides of what ranked choice voting is. And so you can have that information as you understand why it's popular and the power it has to transform our elections for the better. So I'll screen share. I'm not going to spend a lot of time screen sharing because I prefer to have a conversation, but I do want to share just the process of how ranked choice voting works. So let me start with that. All right, can everybody see that? I'm just going to go to slideshow. didn't work, but if you can see this, is that good for people? Yeah. Okay, so
great.
what ranked choice voting is, very simply, is a change to the ballot, and it's a very straightforward, simple change to the ballot that allows you as a voter to rank candidates on the ballot in order of preference. A first choice, second choice, third choice, instead of voting for just a single candidate. Those rankings are important. The reason you rank is to do an instant runoff, to ensure winners in a single seat election win with a majority of the support without needing a second election or a primary election like we do in local nonpartisan elections. So we accomplish that majority winner in just a single trip to the polls. That's the value of ranked choice voting. So here's what a ballot would look like. It looks a little bit different in real life in Minnesota because we have a ballot that duplicates the candidate names in each column, but essentially you can see that you have a first choice option, a second choice option, and a third choice option. So I'm going to demonstrate how this works by using a cake and a pie contest. So it's a dessert contest, which we like to do. We like to put things we easily understand on the ballot, cakes, pies, desserts, beers, wines, coffee, pancakes. It doesn't matter. You can put whatever you want on the ballot as long as there are many candidates, the value of ranked choice voting comes through. So in this contest of desserts, we have cake and pie. In a traditional election that we are used to when there are just two candidates, it's not an issue whether or not one would emerge with a majority of the vote. By default, one will have more votes than the other and be in a majority winner. So in this case, we can see chocolate cake is much more preferred than apple pie and wins with 54% of the vote, a very decisive election. But what happens when that race turns three-way or more, which is common and increasingly common because people want more choice on their ballots? Well, the spoiler vote splitting dynamic sets in is the biggest problem with that scenario. And it's very penalizing for third-party candidates to participate because of that spoiler dynamic. So when a third-party candidate comes on in and competes, we can see what happens. So in this race, chocolate cupcake decides to step in. Well, that's very similar to chocolate cake, and you can see what happens. That candidate splits the vote with chocolate cake. And while chocolate cake in this same set of voters is strongly preferred over apple pie, when that vote is split, the less preferred candidate can win. So the vote was split sufficiently to see that apple pie now prevails and is the winner, even though most voters did not prefer that candidate. And without doing a runoff, you just don't know who most voters prefer. So to get to majority with an instant runoff process, you don't need to call voters back to vote between the top two candidates. We use the rankings to decide that. So in this case, chocolate cake is defeated, and the ballots, the second choice ballots for chocolate cupcake are now counted. You can see that some go to apple pie, most go to cake, and cake wins the election, just as that would have come out in the initial election. So that's one of the biggest values, is to make sure that whoever wins earns the majority of the vote from the voters. And importantly, it makes sure that candidates reach beyond their narrow base to the broad majority of voters to win that election. And the promise that ranked choice voting has, because of the power of incentivizing candidates to do that, is to help mitigate the growing polarization that we're experiencing in our politics. You simply can't stake out your win number at 35 or 40% and win that election anymore. You have to be more expansive. And in order to get reelected, you need to govern to that larger base of voters. So the other benefits that come along with how that process works is that candidates stay focused on the issues and stay positive. Doesn't eliminate negative campaigning altogether, but it penalizes negative campaigning and voters lose votes because of it. So candidates who stay focused, stay positive, and give voters a reason to vote for them, not against another candidate, do better under ranked choice voting. And what we see, and under the experience of ranked choice voting here in Minnesota and across the country, is just how much more diverse and the candidates are and how many more choices there are for voters to vote on. So what we saw in Minneapolis, St. Paul, not St. Paul so much this past year, but in the mayoral election in the last cycle, and in Bloomington and in Minnetonka and other cities, is a much more diverse slate of candidates running and indeed winning. And now we see the most diverse city council in Minneapolis. This is not just true in Minneapolis, but in other cities across the country. And we're seeing that growing diversity quickly, even in a community like Bloomington. And importantly, we see a growing amount of voter participation. You may know that the participation in Minneapolis this past cycle was 54% for a municipal race. That's actually astounding for an off-year election like 2021. It really mirrors a midterm election turnout. And we have seen a steady increase in voter turnout, not just effective participation under ranked choice voting, in large part because it eliminates that low turnout primary. So I want to distinguish between kind of how it's used in nonpartisan and how it would be used in a state election. It's an important distinction. One of the biggest values of ranked choice voting, or why we're seeing the power of it to increase turnout, create more diversity, et cetera, is because it eliminates that low turnout primary in early August that very few voters participate in. And those voters tend to be older and whiter and wealthier than the general election voter. So by eliminating the early summer primary, all candidates get to participate in the election in November, and all the voters get to weigh in one decisive election. And it's a very powerful change to the local process for our elections. In the state application of ranked choice voting, it would be a little bit different because our primaries are partisan primaries, not nonpartisan primaries. So the purpose of the primary in our state elections, whether it be for our statewide offices of governor and all the other constitutional offices, or a legislative race, is to narrow the field to two. Is to narrow, to decide the candidate from each party. And then those candidates participate in the general election. The purpose of a nonpartisan local primary is to simply winnow the field to two, and those two advance no matter what party they represent because they're technically nonpartisan. So it worked a little bit differently. The bill that is now introduced in Minnesota for ranked choice voting statewide would use ranked choice voting for the partisan primary to ensure a majority winner in that step in the process, and then ranked choice voting in the general election to ensure a majority winner in the general election, again, free of spoiler dynamics. What we saw in 2018 in the governor's race, for example, in the DFL side, was a 5-way race for governor. Ranked choice voting would be used in that context to ensure a majority winner out of that race. And again, one of the values is that the winning candidates build a broader coalition to win, whether that be through a primary process or through a general election process. The legislation that is introduced, it's similar to the ERA bill. It has several duplicate bills. Again, that's there to show support. One of them will advance and then will lead the pack in terms of moving forward. The legislation is sponsored by 35 members in the House and 15 members in the Senate. The bill would expand the opportunity for any local jurisdiction, whether that be a school district, municipality, or a county, all nonpartisan races, to use ranked choice voting if they wish. The bill would also implement ranked choice voting for all of our federal and state elections, including presidential primary and presidential general elections, all of our congressional races, Senate races in Congress and in the House, and then our state legislative races as well. So it's a very comprehensive bill. the ability to actually pass this and implement ranked choice voting is there. One of the reasons why it's a fast growing reform is because it's a very achievable reform. In states across the country, 2 now use ranked choice voting, Maine and Alaska, not exactly, one bluish state, one reddish state, somewhat purple, both states. So we can see that it's a nonpartisan reform in that way. Across the country, some 30 plus cities used ranked choice voting last year. 50 should be using it next year. And in states as diverse as Utah, Maryland, across the state country, ranked choice voting is used in different states. In fact, in Utah, 20 plus cities use ranked choice voting. So it is used in red and blue states. I know people are concerned that this becomes a partisan issue in some way, but it truly is a nonpartisan issue. What we like to say and remind people of is that this is a reform that is pro-voter, and it advantages any party and any candidate who is truly representative of and seeking support from the majority of the voters. That's what this is about. So we're hopeful that the legislation continues to advance in Minnesota. We know, though, that while it's a nonpartisan reform, that doesn't mean it doesn't become a partisan issue, as most elections issues have become here in Minnesota and across the country. So it doesn't have the same reception in the Senate, as you can imagine, as it does in the House. In fact, in the Senate, under the leadership of Senator Kiffmeyer, there has been an ongoing effort to preempt ranked choice voting in Minnesota and ban it from use in Minnesota. So we have successfully fought those attacks on ranked choice voting, and hopefully we'll have a different constellation of legislators in the coming years where ranked choice voting is a passable reform. Our work at FairVote Minnesota is to participate in candidate work. We're active in electing pro-democracy champions to the legislature and electing pro-ranked choice voting candidates. Doesn't matter the party they come from. If they support democratic reforms like ranked choice voting, then we actively support their campaigns to make sure that we have people in office enacting reforms that voters are demanding. So that's our work ahead for us. I just wanted to quickly break down some of the success in Bloomington and Minnetonka as the 2 newest cities using ranked choice voting. And again, Marcia is here. It was used in several local races this year for the city council, and in the case of Minnetonka, in the mayoral race, and used and the rankings were truly used in competitive races in those 2 communities. And we like to see the expanded use in cities outside of Minneapolis and St. Paul, so that people can see that this is not just a big city reform, and it can work in communities that are diverse and different in their political makeup and in how voters participate and engage in local elections. Marcia, feel free to comment on the use in Bloomington there and how that went.
I think you're covering it well, Jean. Bloomington did have very close races. All 3 races for the city council went down to counting, and they counted by hand in front of whoever wanted to watch all of the ballots to show how the process worked and to show that it was transparent and fair. So people, some people have said, and I see within the chat, there's some really good questions I hope we can get to, but people have complained about, oh, it's too complicated, it takes too long. But it's only because, at least in Bloomington, there was an attempt to make it as clear as possible how the process worked, which I think was very helpful. And in the future, we will not have to wait that long. We will soon hopefully be able to use software that makes results available as quickly as they are in Minneapolis.
Yeah, I'm glad you raised that. There still is not certified software that's push button in use in Minnesota, but there is in other cities. So that software is available. It simply is a question of having that certified here in Minnesota. And then it's a very quick process. We have the machinery to scan and read those ballots. We just need the software to do the automated tabulation. In Minneapolis, the process goes very, very quickly. All the races were known the very next day. They use a spreadsheet system that accelerates the tabulation process, but it's still technically a manual count without formulas, so that it's not as fast as it could be. New York City, the biggest jurisdiction that uses ranked choice voting, uses automated software, and it really was fast once all the ballots were in terms of reporting those results. So I know we're limited on time, so I can take questions. I could go
So
on
we've
and
got
on
some
with lots
good
of detail, but
Great. Thank you so much, Jean and Marcia, for your insight too. So we'll get to the questions. The first one, an LWV study or program a few years ago discussed many different ways to run ranked choice voting. Do all of the communities now using it use the same system?
thanks for that reminder. I wanted to make sure I really gave big applause to the role of League of Women Voters in launching ranked choice voting here in Minnesota. It was way back now, more than a decade ago, 2004, 2005. The League did an exhaustive study on alternative voting systems, and then had a discussion and a vote statewide on what systems would be supported by the League. The League voted to support the current system, but also ranked choice voting or instant runoff voting, back then it was called, for cities and states. That really helped Minneapolis get the ball rolling. So Minneapolis adopted it in 2006. St. Paul followed in 2009 after a legal challenge that went to the Supreme Court that found unanimously ranked choice voting constitutional. Then St. Louis Park came in 2018, and then Bloomington and Minnetonka in 2020. There's a whole lot more demand by many, many communities that want to do this. There are challenges to that, big ones that only legislation can resolve. And that's why we're so eager to pass the legislation that is a local option for cities that want to do it, as well as statewide. The challenge for other cities is that most of them, with their own charter, with the legal authority to do this, hold elections in even years alongside state and federal elections. If any of you are involved in election administration, you probably know that there are a lot of laws around how a ballot is designed for our state and federal election years. So there isn't any permission in current state law that allows a ranked component to be on the ballot. So a Rochester that wants to use ranked choice voting, Red Wing, Brooklyn, Park has looked at it, several communities have looked at it, and they all hold elections in even years, and they're stuck without this legislation that clears up that language on ballot design and put standards in state law on ranked choice voting. So there is demand. Lots of cities want to do it. It's just a really common sense approach that gets rid of local primaries that are expensive and low turnout and consolidates elections in one go. And we know how easy and achievable it is. So lots of cities want to do it. The legislation is the way to expand it at the local level, in addition to a statewide application.
Great. Thanks, Jean. Another question. I've heard people say that ranked choice voting moves away from one person, one vote. Could you comment on that?
Sure. I think that's why I like to do the example of how it works, because it demonstrates why that's not true and why the Supreme Court of Minnesota said that's not true. So it's fully one person, one vote because it's a runoff, but in a single election. So just like our current primary and general election system provide, you have a vote in the primary and a vote in the general. Ranking gives you a vote in each round of the counting, which simulates 2 election cycles. So no one has any more votes than anyone else. If you rank your first choice, and you don't want your second choice to come into play because you want your first choice to win. So you have the option to vote your heart out without fear of splitting the vote or spoiling the election. You vote your conscience. If your first choice is popular and becomes the ultimate winner, your first choice counts in every round. If your first choice is a candidate that's not popular and drops out, gets eliminated, your second choice counts in that next round of counting. So everyone has a vote count in every round, just like you would in 2 physical elections that would be a runoff in that way. Ranking is the way to ensure that everyone has a vote that counts in every round.
Very interesting. They're great. Thanks. Great examples. I think you might have answered this one already, but are any of the cities using ranked choice voting having elections in even years along with state and national?
Yes,
If so,
sadly,
how does it
no.
work?
No, I mean, I think some of the cities could pass it and use it for special elections, which is valuable. I mean, we just saw a special election in Brooklyn Park for mayor. Super low turnout special elections, hold 2 rounds that are expensive. So cities could do it in special elections where you're not dealing with putting it on the general election ballot in November. So that could be true, but no, they are not. They want to, and again, the legislation is the way to do this.
Also in Bloomington, Marcia, how did the candidates feel, or was there a reaction to ranked choice voting?
Oh, well, that's an interesting one. There had been a lot of pushback when we were voting to do ranked choice voting by some of the more conservative voters who felt like it was a Democrat plot, and they put more people on the ballot in there that way they have a better chance of winning. And so when the election came up this fall, there were 3 or 4 candidates for each office, only one of whom was a progressive candidate. And there were 2 or 3 candidates from the more conservative side, and they still lost. So the people who won generally campaign on a more positive note of here's my vision, here's what I want to see happen for Bloomington. Virtually with maybe one exception of the candidates who were in opposition to the winners, voted on a negative, the city is on the wrong track, everything's terrible, taxes are too high, we need to stop this and stop that. So I would say, and it was more attacking the people who were running. So the whole idea of negative campaigning did not work in this case, which is one of the arguments that we've used in favor of ranked choice voting for a long time. If you want to appeal to a broad constituency within any jurisdiction, having a positive vision and having positive ideas rather than just tearing down other candidates it's a much better strategy. And FairVote did training for all of the candidates. And so training was given to candidates from across the spectrum in Bloomington. And Jean can speak to that if there's interest in how that went. Explaining to people, this is the best way to campaign in a ranked choice voting election if you want to get broad support.
No, I'll add to that. What we hear from candidates sometimes after the fact is that they really preferred it over the old system. So keep in mind, the old system where you had 2 elections you had to get through is cumbersome for candidates. So you spend a lot of time and money chasing that primary voter, and you know who they are because they're in the voter file, and you leave everyone else out of the conversation. You just want to chase that primary voter and hope you get through that eye of the needle. It's expensive and not very rewarding. So with ranked choice voting, they all know they jump in the race early in the year and will be on the ballot in November and campaign to the whole population in that way and campaign for votes in November. So they enjoy that. The other piece that they remark on is that they don't need to exclude voters. When they door knock or phone bank or are at an event, they can say, hey, look, if I'm not your first choice, I want to earn your second choice. So it's a much more natural way for people to talk to someone rather than saying, oh, you're voting for someone else. Well, thank you for your time and goodbye. And you know, they take office under the old system, they take office. Well, I didn't even get to hear what that person thinks because I didn't want to waste my time on it. That's our current system, and that's how it works. And that's why we have the incentive to polarize. There's just nothing bringing us together. So the real hope and promise, especially when we see our democracy under such huge attack, is that this structural change can go a long way. It's not the only thing we need to do, but can go a long way in being a fix to what's so broken in our democracy. We have to defend voting rights. Don't get me wrong, like that's the front line defense, but you can't win the game without offense. We need strategic options to make sure that our system and our approach to how we're participating in our democracy incentivizes coalition building, compromise, consensus building, problem solving once people are in office. And if we can't accomplish that, we can't accomplish any of the other things we need to do, whether it be on climate change or abortion or the Equal Rights Amendment. Once we don't have a functioning democracy, all those other things are impossible to accomplish. So the importance of this couldn't be greater. And the reason why it's so exciting for voters to think that we can change is because it's achievable. It's not worth pursuing things that are not achievable. We don't have time anymore. Our democracy is in crisis. This is achievable, and that's why it's happening across the country. More and more states are looking at it. There could be ballot measures as soon as this year in different states, so watch for that. Alaska implements it this year. Many believe that Murkowski, for example, wouldn't be able to run if she didn't have ranked choice voting. So we'll see what happens in Alaska. And Minnesota could become one of the next states if we can achieve this legislatively. You should know that we can't do this by ballot. We don't have an initiative and referendum here in Minnesota. So this would be a change through the legislature, which is why we engage in electing candidates who believe in a better democracy. That's a big part of our work. And for those of you who wish to engage in that, of course, this is an election cycle. It all starts on February 1 at caucuses. I'm assuming many of you may go. On our website, if you just click on fairvotemn.org, you'll see the opportunity to download a resolution for ranked choice voting. Feel free to take that to your caucus and engage in advocating at the legislature for this kind of change. Again, the League has been a big part of it. So a lot of people on our list are League of Women Voters people, and it'd be great to have more engaged. And we're happy to make presentations to local units as you wish, whether it be for a community application or simply education for members.
Great. Thank you, Jean, so much. And thank you, Suzanne. A couple of things to follow up. If anyone has any remaining questions, pop them into the chat quick, but I want to make a couple of next steps overall. One is, again, if any of you on this call want to follow these bills on behalf of the League of Women Voters, to either follow them, to educate our group, to help with advocacy, let me know. We, again, as you know, at our state staff, we have just Nick, who's sort of half-time, and we will have a full defensive mode, as we just saw yesterday, some of the preview into the voter suppression bills coming our way. I also really want to encourage you in your leagues. These are great programs to have. I know a lot of people are wondering, and they're still in the Zoom world, but as you can see, Suzanne and Jean have great updates to share. So I'm sure they would love to hear from any of you as well if you want to do a program in your own local league to educate people about these really two very critical and league supported democracy enhancements, things we need. So, all right, very good. We will, this has been recorded. It'll also be available on our website after our January Jumpstart sessions. We will also get the chats. People have been putting things in the chats. We'll remind you all of those great websites. But if you want to take a look now, feel free to do so. And thank you all again for taking time with us over lunch to learn and for our presentations. All right, take care, everyone. Bye-bye.
Thank you.
Thank you. Goodbye.